That was the head of civil engineering at Purdue University in Indiana. And before I go, the UK's King Charles, has sent a message of condolences to the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And let's read some of his statement. He says, "My wife and I have been shocked and profoundly saddened by the news of the devastating earthquakes in southeastern Turkey." And he adds that I can only begin to imagine the scale of suffering and loss as a result of these dreadful tragedies. And I particularly wanted to convey our deepest and most heartfelt sympathy to the families of all those who've lost their loved ones. So the King Charles paying his condolences.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News. The frantic search for survivors in Turkey and Syria continues as the death toll from Monday's earthquakes reaches 7,000. But the humanitarian routes into northwest Syria are currently impassable. In rebel-held areas, they are largely digging with their hands. Rishi Sunak shakes up the cabinet, new roles and new departments, reflecting the Prime Minister's priorities on energy and science. And the energy giant BP says it is reversing some of its earlier plans to cut oil and gas output after announcing record profits. Tonight, with The Context, the former Labour MP and Cabinet Minister Caroline Flint and the Republican Lanny Chen, formerly Policy Director for Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. A very warm welcome to the programme. The United Nations says thousands of children may be among the dead, buried in the rubble after the two earthquakes and aftershocks that have hit Turkey and northwest Syria. The known death toll now stands tonight at 7,200. An international rescue effort is underway and sorely needed. There are still thousands of collapsed buildings to search. Turkish journalists say they are getting voice messages and live locators from people still trapped under the rubble. President Erdogan today declared a 3-month state of emergency in 10 provinces. Across the whole region, that is 23 million people. And the challenges they face are enormous. The power has been disrupted, the roads damaged, and as you can see, the weather is freezing. They are appalling conditions for rescue teams in Turkey, but imagine how much more difficult it must be across the border in northwest Syria. There is no safe route in for the aid. Most of the work in rebel-held areas is being done by the White Helmets, who are experts in searching bombed-out buildings. But they are 3,000 volunteers among 4.5 million. A warning, these pictures we're about to show you are pretty distressing. This was footage today of a rescue in Cinderez in northern Syria, where they were clawing by hand to free Noor, this little girl surrounded by dust and debris. Small miracles among mountains of misery. I'm joined tonight by Obode Alwan, the media coordinator for the White Helmets, who are helping with those rescue efforts in Syria, and also Charles Lister, director of Syria and counter-terrorism programmes at the Middle East Institute. Welcome both. Obode, can I talk with you first of all? Tell me, you're sitting there in Istanbul, clearly trying to get humanitarian aid across the border. What is the situation on that one route into the northwest part of the country? OK, we'll have to leave it there. Obode Alwan and Charles Lister, thank you very much indeed for your company. Thank you. Let's take a quick look at some of the other stories making headlines today. A former London police officer has been given 36 life sentences for a series of rapes and assaults which he carried out while serving with the city's Metropolitan Police. David Carrick will serve a minimum of 30 years in jail before being considered for parole. He pleaded guilty to 85 offences committed over a 17-year period. The judge said he had caused irretrievable devastation to his victims. Officials in Ukraine say tens of thousands of Russians are being sent to the front for a new offensive in eastern Ukraine, which they think will come next week. The Defence Ministry has warned repeatedly that an attack was pending. British officials here say Russia is unlikely to build up sufficient forces to substantially change the outcome of its invasion and almost certainly lacks the munitions and units that would be required. The energy giant BP has doubled its profits to almost $28 billion this past year as energy prices soared following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. BP was one of the first oil and gas companies to announce it would cut emissions to net zero by 2050. But today, the board told shareholders it needs to keep investing in oil and gas to meet current demands. Just pick up on that, Caroline, if you would. I suppose there's been a wide-ranging debate about the profits and windfall taxes, but we expect, or we anticipate, these companies are going to start tilting towards renewable technologies, greener technologies. And here you have the board of BP saying, no, actually, we're consuming a lot of oil and gas, so we need to pump more. Yeah. Well, let's focus a little bit on energy because the British Prime Minister has been shaking up his cabinet today, a reshuffle of sorts. He's been appointing Greg Hands as the new chairman of the Conservative Party. He replaces the sacked Nadhim Zahawi. But of more interest, probably, to how government works and how the country is run is the reorganisation of some of the key ministries. So business and energy have been broken up. Grant Shapps will now be Secretary of State for the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. Business and trade have been merged, headed by Kemi Badenoch. And another new department, Science, Innovation and Technology, will be led by the former Culture Secretary, Michelle Donnellan. So let's speak to David Wallace-Lockhart, who's joining us from Westminster. I'm not sure this is going to put rocket boosters on the Prime Minister's poll numbers, much as he would like it to do so, but perhaps it does tell us a little bit about his priorities, David. OK, David, thank you very much for that. Caroline, does the brass plate on the door make any real difference to what Whitehall does or how civil servants behave?
I mean, occasionally, if you actually put in place people who know what they're doing, I suppose it helps. But it is really just about changing out. If it's just about changing out personalities and names, then probably not so much. There's a fundamental
It depends
problem.
Whose name is on that brass plate. Yes, I like it very much. Good. Well, we're going to talk about US politics in the next half hour. We're going to go to a short break. But of course, it is a big night in American politics. It is the State of the Union. Stay with us for that. I want to talk to you about the politics of this. Did she not think she was going to get that question?
It's important to remember that this is a negotiation.
It's a good photo of.
I have an opportunity to create chaos.
There is always an email. We are so insignificant in this cosmos. Do you want some facts on baguettes? I'm just feeding you the stories. Maybe this is The Context.
News in depth. The Context with Christian Fraser on BBC World News.
We start with a big win.
Stand by for a moment of history.
The headlines keep breaking.
Now to football, tennis,
Formula One,
rugby union, FIFA World Cup.
The debate keeps raging.
They're still the team to beat.
My heart rate was up.
Proud of everyone involved.
We've only got ourselves to blame.
The results keep coming.
I just cried a little bit.
It's going quite well. I don't know what to say.
Absolute disbelief.
It means an awful lot.
To be crowned champions of the world.
For all the latest results, headlines and analysis, Sport Today on BBC World News.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News. President Biden will deliver his third State of the Union address tonight to a joint session of Congress. And this time it is Kevin McCarthy sitting behind him. Donald Trump's former press secretary, now governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, will deliver the Republican response. Alarm bells ringing within US aviation. A congressional committee says air traffic control needs urgent attention after 2 near misses in a month. And is tonight the night that LeBron James becomes the greatest point scorer in NBA history? Tonight, with The Context, the former Labour MP and Cabinet Minister Caroline Flint and the Republican Lani Chen, who was formerly policy director for Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. Welcome back to the programme. This past weekend, while keeping a weather eye on Chinese balloons, Joe Biden retreated from public view to the solitude of Camp David. With him was the inner circle, his chief of staff, the close advisors, and the chief speechwriter, who since November has been working and reworking the State of the Union address, which the president will deliver tonight. By all accounts, the speech was revised and practiced in front of the teleprompters, read aloud from top to bottom. The president, who has spoken about his stutter, likes to mark up these speeches with lines and dashes that he uses as a signal for where to breathe or where to pause between his words. And like most State of the Union addresses, the speech has to take on the personality of the man that is delivering it. That is the job of the speechwriter. So let's speak to the man who used to do it for another president. Terry Suplat crafted nearly 500 speeches for Barack Obama, working as his deputy director of speechwriting until 2017. Welcome, Terry, to the programme. Does that sound familiar? The weekends locked away in Camp David, reworking the speech. Did you do plenty of that? Thank you for being with us. Lovely to hear from Terry and his recollections of writing for President Obama. Now, US lawmakers say the safety systems that govern air traffic control are in need of urgent attention. For the second time in a month, a catastrophic collision has been narrowly avoided at a US airport. A cargo plane landing in Austin, Texas on Saturday came within 100 feet of a Southwest Airlines passenger jet that was taking off from the same runway. It was only the quick thinking of the FedEx pilot who aborted the landing that prevented a collision. The incident follows a similar near miss at JFK in New York in January, where a Delta flight that was taking off was forced to perform an emergency stop to avoid an American Airlines plane crossing the same runway. OK, we'll have to leave that there. Michael McCormick, thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, it is time for the panel. Let's start with you, Caroline, because you've picked out a story which is on the, I think, the BBC website today of a 100-year-old veteran who was rescued at sea. Well, you pick up the story. Extraordinary. Needs 36 points to break the all-time scoring record. 21 years ago to the day, Lani, he featured on Sports Illustrated with the title The Chosen One. And that is the thing here. It's the longevity in the sport. He was one of the first straight out of college into the team. The NBA rules have changed. So if he breaks it tonight, it probably won't be broken again. He will be the all-time scoring basketball player, LeBron James. Best of luck to him. Lani Chen and Caroline, thank you very much indeed for your company this evening. I'll be away tomorrow, but Context will, of course, be here. We hope you'll join us for that. Good night.
Hello, this special weather update looks at conditions across those parts of Turkey and Syria